11th year that we have been interviewing people who live in the Bronxville area. Today we have a very special guest, one whom many of you know because he's very much a part of our community, the president of Concordia College, Viji George. Viji, thank you for joining us today.
Marcia, it's a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon.
What I'd like to do in the beginning is just get a little bit about your background, and you have one of the most cosmopolitan international backgrounds of anybody I've ever known.
Thank you.
You started out
born and brought up for the first 16, 17 years, it seems like so long ago, in Madras, India, which is in the southeastern coast of India. Then came out to Chicago to visit my sister, who happened to be doing her residency in Chicago. And
what age were you? Were you young?
Oh, I was about 17, you know, and decided to come out for a visit. And then one thing led to another, and decided to go to college in Chicago, and started in Chicago at Concordia Forest.
Yeah.
Finished that, and then said to myself, well, you know, continue on. I happened to be interested in psychology and counseling and those kinds of things, and then went on to get my doctorate at Northern Illinois. And
what did you get your doctorate in? You got it
in counseling psychology, you know. And again, now in the 70s. That was a big thing,
right?
You know.
Well, it's still important now. We don't want to take it away from it.
Our sense of mental health has sort of evolved over the last, you know, couple of decades. But
right.
At that time,
what did you do your dissertation on?
Much of the work that I did was on learned helplessness. A guy by the name of Martin Seligman, who was at University of Pennsylvania at that time, was doing some work in that area. And the relationship between learned helplessness and depression.
Learned helplessness.
Helplessness, yes.
And go ahead, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. The idea is that technically speaking, the notion is that when you make a response to any contingency in your environment, and your response does not really correlate to an outcome, you know, and if you then experience the same condition over and over and over again.
Can you give us an example
yeah.
of this? Because I think this is so interesting. I mean, this affects all of our children. We can learn a lot from you on this.
Well, I don't know about that, but the idea is when you try something, and let's say math, for example.
The child has math to do.
Yeah, or any academic area or sports, but let's keep it to math, and you keep trying your level best. You work really hard, and you go and do your thing. You take your test, and you bomb it.
Yeah.
And you come back, and the same experience repeats itself over and over and over and over again. The idea here is that when you are faced with that repeated kind of experience, what you begin to say to yourself is, look, no matter what I do, it ain't going to make a difference.
Right.
I mean, that kind of thinking begins to emerge. And so what you do is adopt a helpless attitude. So you, rather than trying to overcome whatever your obstacle might be, you give up. You become helpless. So this is the place where we see ourselves included, and in many instances our kids who say, look, you know, I've given it all I've had. It just simply doesn't work. I'm no good at this thing. And then they, you know, accept
What advice, now the child has to learn math. What advice would you give parents, I mean, with advice?
You know, what we used to say was the critical thing to do is to go back to this idea of experiencing success. So what you need to do is to rearrange the contingency so that the person begins to experience a small bit of success. And then you begin to build on that. So you turn the failure orientation into a success orientation. But it's critical and it's imperative that we don't put a task in front of them that they're not going to be able to succeed.
To succeed at.
So you need to make
So maybe they have to take it in smaller bites. Smaller steps.
Relatively small bites.
But whatever the step is, they better be able to succeed.
And then you begin to build on that. Now, if you think about the same thing...
I'm still at 1 + 1.
Yeah, that's right.
But I know it's 2. Anyway.
And that's fundamental, for example, also in depressive thinking. You know, when you feel down and blue and depressed, you say to yourself, you know, it's not going to make a difference.
Yeah.
that's the core element in the way in which we process, what happens in our environment. Yeah. So that really was
what your dissertation was on.
Yes.
I bet, now we're going to learn more about you personally, but I bet you use a lot of your psychology and your background in psychology as president of Concordia College.
It comes in handy. I think particularly when you think about so much of what you do in this kind of a business is relational.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, I tend to emphasize personal contact, face-to-face interactions,
right.
and so on and so forth.
Makes all the difference.
Makes all the difference.
Yeah. Now, you're on numerous boards. I mean, I don't know how, as president of a college, you can serve on all these boards, but one of them is the board of the Lutheran Educational Conference of North America.
It's an organization,
a big one,
yes,
right?
It's an organization that I'm really proud of. What it is a compilation of all 56, and mind you, we have 56 colleges and universities that have a Lutheran affiliation around the nation. So this is an organization that brings all of them together, and then we as presidents work together. There's a lot of interactive kinds of stuff that happens between us and our campuses. We tend to think about larger marketing kinds of issues together, and positioning kinds of issues together. So, and also faculty exchanges and so on.
Right,
and so
right. And you're not just involved in things in the States. I mean, you're on the help me pronounce it, Bethania Foundation for Orphanages in southern India.
One of my closest friends who was deceased, he and his family, Bob Hennig, he and his family started this operation in southern India many, many years ago. And so this has a emotional and kind of a tie to that. And what this is an organization that helps orphans, defined slightly differently in that part of the world as we
You were saying that they aren't really necessarily orphans. Their parents aren't necessarily dead. They bring them to this place when they can't afford to raise them.
That's correct.
Yeah.
In many of those developing nations, India included, when you talk about orphanages, in many instances, you bring a kid there out of economic necessity, not necessarily because both parents are dead. So a parent, a couple might decide they already have 3 kids and now there's a 4th one over here and they just simply cannot feed one more. They bring that child sometimes temporarily, to tide them over for 3 or 4 years, but sometimes permanently. But that, is not the way in which we think of orphanages here.
Here in the States, that's true. And you're president of the American Lutheran College faculty.
Well, again, that I used to do. I'm not there anymore.
You're not now.
But again, what it is a organization that brings all the faculty members from all of these colleges and universities together.
Again.
As a matter of fact, they're planning on meeting on our campus next year, and so I'm really looking forward to making those connections again.
That'll be nice to bring them to Bronxville, see this beautiful village. And of course, just to round this out, your wife Janet is active here in the community.
She really is, and she works for our regional church body, which is located in our campus. And apart from that, is involved with the conservatory, the Girl Scouts, and I can't keep track of all the
things she does. Well, you have 2 girls in the Bronxville school.
That's right. Sarah, who's a junior, will be turning 16 in a couple of days, and all that comes with that.
Right.
And Emily, who's a 6th grader.
So you're really fully involved in the community and the school system and everything.
Try to be.
Well, you do a very good job of it. Let's talk a little bit about Concordia, because Concordia has been and is such a wonderful resource for the community, and a lot of us have used the facilities a lot and enjoyed all the programs you offer. You became president in when?
Oh, it seems so long ago.
I know. I didn't have the date.
But 1999.
1999.
Yeah.
And what led to the why? How did it come about?
Ralph, my predecessor, who was the president,
Schultz.
Ralph Schultz, who was my predecessor, who was here for 26 years as a president. When he retired, first. I thought about putting my name in the hat and then decided not to because there was a lot of other things that I was doing. And for whatever reason, the search process at that time did not really produce the candidate that the college wanted. And so they went back to another search process. And at that time, several of my friends and colleagues said to me, "You really ought to leave your name in." And,
they twisted your arm.
And this is what it got me. You know?
Well, they were fortunate.
But it really has been a wonderful 4 years.
Well, it's a lot different than being a professor or being
as you know,
a counselor.
Yeah.
Now, there's a number of things you've done while you're there at the college. We're going to talk specifically about. Well, why don't we begin? You know, what makes Concordia unique? What is the mission of this college?
I think that's a great question. You know, historically, we've been there for a long, long time.
Yeah,
you know,
1908 or something?
1908.
Yeah.
Before, you know, and at that time, it really was an institution that prepared people to serve the church.
Right.
You know, teachers and preachers and so on and so forth. Now, over the last, several decades, we have evolved. Now we are a full liberal arts institution.
Mm-hmm. 4-year
liberal arts institution. Even though we are affiliated with the Lutheran Church, only about 40% or so, less than 40% of our students are Lutheran, predominantly Roman Catholic, and we draw from southern Westchester all the way to Ohio and Colorado and so on.
Right, right.
But when I sort of moved into this position, Marcia, the kinds of questions I was asking myself is, in the larger educational scene, particularly in the higher educational scene, is an institution like Concordia a viable alternative? Mm-hmm. Particularly located in a community like this, so you begin to ask yourself, what kind of a role can Concordia play? And I come back to it in many ways to the central theme. And the theme, for me, is a transforming theme. What I think we do best at Concordia is we make, cauliflowers out of cabbages, as Mark Twain said.
Right.
And the purpose of education is to take a cabbage and make it into a cauliflower. And that's really what we are all about. A great deal of what we do is really focused on that transformational kind of a process. We are not competitive in the traditional sense of the word. But what we really focus on is can we take a kid who comes from, for the most part, a middle class to upper middle class background, and work with him to liberally educate him or her, and so that they leave qualitatively different from what they were when they entered us, came to us. Not just in terms of what they know, but who they are as a human being.
Right.
And that, I think, is what we
Well, I have always been struck with the kind of person that Concordia students are. They definitely have an ethical system. They've definitely thought about their priorities. I mean, and it comes across. So I know a lot of attention is given to that. Developing character, developing...
it is.
Yeah.
But in today's scene, when bigger is better, we are a very small institution.
How many students do you have?
Far less than 600, 520, somewhere in that ballpark, full-time students. And our facilities are such that we are not going to ever,
expand.
Be huge in the traditional sense. So it's a David and Goliath kind of a setup when you're competing against institutions like Iona that are almost 10 times
the size. Yeah.
Size,
What are the programs that you think are that you want to mark as being most noteworthy at Concordia?
We are well known for our education program, and that has a rich tradition and history because we've been in that business of preparing teachers to serve the church for a long period of time, and then that has sort of carried over. Our student teachers have an excellent reputation in the local school systems. We cannot place them fast enough. They get hired a lot faster than we can actually produce them.
There's such a shortage of teachers now anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we have an extremely good education program. We have a great music program and a tradition of music.
That's what we know about in the village particularly.
And we are, both church music, choral music, and of course our conservatory program, that also serves the community in that fashion. We have a wonderful social work program on campus. As a matter of fact, one of the few undergraduate social work programs that is nationally accredited. And we send quite a lot of those students on to grad school and on to placement. We have a very good business program. So those tend to be...
That's right. You're expanding the business program. You have a few people in Bronxville helping you out. Tell us a little bit about that.
That's right. We have some local folks. Carlo Vittorini, for example, is teaching a course on campus this semester and having a ball.
What's his course on?
On publication.
I would come to hear anything Carlo had to say.
And he's got his
he's
good
the former
friend...
producer of...
publisher of Parade Magazine.
Of Parade
CEO
Magazine.
and publisher of Parade Magazine. And we have, one of our alums is the publisher of Business Week. So we have,
that entree into the publishing world.
And so this has been a real great, connect with Carlo.
That's good. Being a president of a college, no matter how big or small, is not an easy job. What do you find... First of all, what do you find you spend most of your time doing? I mean, takes the most amount of your time?
Raising money.
Raising funds. I knew you didn't say
it. It's impossible for you to educate a student with what you can charge them.
Right.
And nobody can do it.
Right.
Therefore, you have to find non-tuition revenues to break even and keep the doors open. And non-tuition revenue really needs to come out of advancement kind of work. So I spend a big portion of my time in fundraising.
And do you travel throughout the country?
Kevin Cook, that many people in the community know.
A lot of us know Kevin.
Is a part of that venture with me. So between the two of us and the others on campus, we do quite a bit of traveling. I tend to spend more of my time on major donors, and then Kevin sort of does a whole array of things.
But it's never ending.
Oh, it never does. It never does.
And I bet it's just your favorite thing to do. Well, next to fundraising?
Next to fundraising, the other thing really is you need to spend as a president, as a cheerleader for the institution. Not only with the internal constituency, but also with the external constituency. For better or for worse, you begin to personify the institution. And that at least is the current reality. And so what people think of Concordia, for better or for worse, is dependent on the kind of relationship that they have with me.
Right.
And so I spend quite a bit of time in that public relations kind of mode with the external constituency. And with the internal community, making sure that our strategic plans are in place and that the administrative staff is doing what they need to be doing in my absence. So you really are not there running the institution.
Yeah, you have to delegate that. You can't possibly be hands-on in that regard.
Yeah. And the hardest thing for me is to find a way of being at every place.
You can't clone yourself.
Yeah. And for some reason or the other, people expect you to do that. Particularly when we're a small institution, they expect to see me or talk to me all the way from when people want to make a complaint about a student parking on the street.
Right.
They want to call my office, to, and I'm glad they do, or feel that they can.
Yeah.
So being available, making yourself available,
is just a tremendous job. I suppose you're out almost every night.
It really is, yes, or at least most nights.
Right.
And that becomes an issue, trying to balance that with
the
growing
family.
kids.
Yeah, and missing some of the fun
That's
things.
right,
I
that's
know.
right.
Well, what do you find is the most enjoyable thing of the job? I mean, what do you like most about it?
The culminating experience in a college president's life, I think, at least for me, is to stand there in May and hand out the diploma to the student. And in most instances, you stand there and look at some of these kids come through, and you say to yourself, wow, what a journey that they have been on.
So you actually do know most of your students?
Yes.
See, now that is wonderful.
Yes,
how many colleges can say the president knows most of them?
And to look at them and say, look, I remember when this kid walked in as a freshman, and look where he or she is. You know? And to see that growth, to see that change, to see that transformation, I think is what it's all about.
Yeah.
You know? Then you sort of say to yourself, that was worth it.
You know, in academia we say student success.
Yeah, it really is.
And you really are focused on
but to me,
success.
it's much more than what kind of a job do they get or which grad school are they going to. I mean, all of those things are important, but somehow it is that personal transformation that you see in their face.
And you probably have a lot of the alumni come back to say, hello, President George, how are you doing? Yeah,
we do. And
that's gratifying.
Phone calls. And what's very interesting is the number of alumni who bring their children back. You know.
And so you have second generation.
All the time. We also have several instances where we have 3 kids from the same family.
At school.
At school.
At the same time, or
time,
almost at the same time, Well, that's fun,
really
too.
is.
Now, Concordia has always done so much with the community, and I just want to have, talk a little bit about that. You have this Community Leadership Award that you've been giving for 10, I don't know how many years.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, again, there too, to set the context, I've felt strongly in the last several years, and I think Ralph did too before me, that the relationship between the college and the village needs to be a symbiotic kind of a relationship. I think the college is good for the community, and the community is good for the college. And I think we need to find ways of making that find fruition in day-to-day life. And as such, there are lots of things that we do. And then one of the things that we do is this leadership award. This year, the Sebrings are being honored.
Ellen and Bob Sebring.
The Sebrings are being honored.
By the way, that's November the 6th, right?
November
so for any
the 6th.
of you that want to join and...
appreciate the plug. I really do. And they're wonderful people.
I can't think of 2 people more deserving.
Yes, I agree. And the notion here is to lift up people in our community, in the Eastchester, Tuckahoe, Bronxville community, who have dedicated their lives to the cause of education.
Right.
And somehow making life different for the people in our community. Right. And this has been a wonderful event for us.
Well, it has been.
It really has. And we also take a lot of pride in opening our facilities to the community.
You have the book review series.
Yes, we do the book
good.
review. John Barr did his piece recently. George Yeager did his piece.
His book.
Judge Fuller just did his.
So you're using this year. You've been using local.
A lot of local.
There are a lot of them.
Yes, there are.
It's amazing how many
there are. There are. It is amazing. It is amazing.
And you have have you got any new construction projects going on now? Are you pretty well built out?
We're pretty much built out. We are in the process of finishing off the library. When we first built the library in the early 70s, for whatever reason, we never really completed the second floor. So we are actually just got approval from the zoning board, and I think there's a few other approval processes that are being, taken care of, which is really being coordinated on campus for us by Eloise Morgan.
Well, we all know Eloise Morgan.
Yes.
Eloise we're in the Yeager room, of course, most of you know right now. And Eloise is the chairman of the board of the library. And also,
and she has been a wonderful, wonderful addition to our staff over the last several months. And so once that begins to fall into place, our hope is to get that thing completed.
And you have how many dorms? You have
we have 4 dormitories on campus.
And do all the students live on campus, or are some of them?
About 70%, slightly less than 70% live on campus, and the rest of them commute.
Right. And most of them do not have cars. Is that true, or is that not?
Well, I should be careful in what I say, because I'm not sure that I know all the rules. But I know for a fact that freshmen are not allowed to have cars on campus. And I think there's some kind of rules for the sophomores, but juniors and seniors too.
What I think is amazing is how well the Concordia students fit into the community. I don't think I've lived here for 30 years, and I've never felt that the Concordia students weren't very mindful of the fact that they're living in a community and fit in well. And
for the most part, I think you're absolutely right. And again, we need to understand that we're dealing with 18 to 22-year-old population.
Right.
And who are at the peak of their developmental cycle, and you know, they like to have fun, and so those kinds of things happen. But I agree with you. I think for the most part, we you know, incidences of vandalism is very, very low on our campus. We really don't have a lot of those kinds of issues.
Right. Well, now, looking down the road, what do you see as the big challenges for Concordia College in the future? Where do you want to take it? Where do you think
I think for small institutions like ours, that is institutions that are less than 1,000, it's always going to be a fiscal challenge, simply because you don't have the tuition revenue base to do the kinds of things that you need to do. So the fiscal issue is always going to be an issue that we need to be creative about, you know, finding ways of resolving. Incidentally, that's not only true for Concordia, but for all small private liberal arts institutions.
Do you have a foundation?
We do have a foundation. Actually, we have several members from the local community who serve on that foundation.
Who are they? Who are on
Viji, Cy Ford, John Preesing, George Voida, Marilyn Hill. I'm sure I'm going to forget others, but you know how it goes.
Forgiven if you do.
And there are people like that who help, you know, manage some of the funds that's in the foundation. And we also have a corporate advisory board, you know, with
Who's
people
on,
like
who from the
Richard Dressdale is on it, Bill Muldrow, Hugh Sullivan, and again, you know.
See, it's just amazing how many people from this community are involved in the
Yes,
college.
you'll be surprised. You really would be surprised. All the way from how many people in the community play tennis at our place, work out in our fitness center.
Right, well,
I mean, you know.
that's very important.
On and on. Or the fact that both the soccer teams and the baseball teams and other teams from the high school using our facilities.
Now, when are you going to build a swimming pool?
Sarah Lawrence
there was a period in my life when we were going to build a swimming pool.
I know. That was actually. There's still a plan laying around someplace from way
There's
back
still
in
the
the
hookups
60s.
to actually do it attached
way back
to the
out
gym.
there. Apparently, I was told that was a big issue at one time.
It was a very big issue at one time. I think it's changed. Well, we really appreciate your taking the time to join us today.
It really was a pleasure.
If you haven't had a chance to get over to the Concordia campus and just see it, you ought to do it. And the library facilities are just wonderful. I don't know if I can offer them to all of us, but I know my children used them a lot. And,
come to our concerts.
The concerts are wonderful.
Our art gallery is
that's right. You're actually, you mentioned just one last thing. You mentioned that there was going to be you're going to be honored by the National Art Club, and the whole college was going to be. So why don't we end with that? What is that all about?
Thank you. I appreciate that opportunity. On November 7th, the National Arts Club is honoring...
That's the day, not after Election Day. 2 days.
2 days after Election Day. The National Arts Club is honoring Concordia College in Gramercy Park, and we are really tickled pink because this really is an honor for us. Senator Schumer will be there representing the college. And several others.
And why are you being honored? I mean, what did you do to get this?
Which is a great question.
Great honor.
And I think particularly for us as a small institution to appear on their radar, I think is a neat thing. Again, goes back to what I was talking about earlier. That is that we tend to focus on transforming individuals, you know, and we are very upfront about that. We tend to create a community on our campus that reflects the world in which we live in. 28 countries are represented on our campus, African Americans, Hispanics. I mean, so it is a very reflective kind of community, and we're very intentional about that. Those kinds of things caught their fancy.
And so that's why they're on.
That's really wonderful.
Congratulations to
Thank
you
you.
and the whole
Thank you.
college. And again, thank you very much for
Pleasure
joining
to
us
be here.
today. And thank you also very much for joining us. And as always, I want to thank Peter North for being our wonderful cameraman and putting this program together. Thank you very much, and good night. Nope.